Reconsider Christ podcast provides real-life examples on how Christ works to interact with our lives. Our guests paint on the canvas of life their stories of joy, heartache, struggle, and victory. You will learn more about the true nature of Christ, for it is time to reconsider Christ. Five-time Emmy award-winning sportscaster Phil Stone gives us a transparent, courageous tour behind the scenes of his TV glamorous life. He is a single dad with full custody of his two children, living the dream of sportscasting for ESPN and NBC while desperately looking for meaning. His career is soaring. Phil commits himself as a great father to his children. He wins Emmys for his work, and yet something is missing. Finally, one Sunday morning, when Phil was in his mid-40s, three close friends show up at his door and declare that Phil and his two kids are going to church with them that day. This event starts Phil on a path of discovering Christ, for which he is ever grateful. Phil gives great advice in this podcast, which will encourage you to continue your pursuit of Christ. After a very successful broadcasting career, Phil joined Christian Businessmen's Connection and has loved every minute of the past 14 years. His day is filled with helping Christian men build meaningful relationships with Jesus and with each other. Well, good afternoon, Phil. It's a great pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Hey, Gene, thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
And of course, I come to this podcast with great trepidation because as our audience knows from the introduction, you're a five-time Emmy-winning sportcaster who has a voice of honey and gold, and I'm just an old Texas boy with a big accent. So,
well, you know, this voice came to me in high school, and I've said to so many people over the years, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have this voice. I certainly don't have a face for television, but back in those days, your voice was everything. And I learned back in high school and through college and in my professional career, utilizing that voice, controlling the voice, learning how to use it properly can pay great dividends. And it's been a wonderful life, I can tell you that.
Well, what's fascinating to me, speaking about your voice, is in our earlier conversations, you told me about the high school teacher who actually heard it in your voice and encouraged you to even consider broadcasting. Tell me about that experience.
Thank you, Gene, for bringing that up. I was a junior in high school in Columbus, Ohio, Columbus North, Polar Bears. And Beta Gregg is her name. And she stopped me one day when class was over and she said, Phil, would you stay for just a moment? I said, yes, Miss Gregg, I'd be happy to. And I walked back over and she said, I just want to share something with you. With your voice and your love for sports, you might want to consider thinking about a life in sports broadcasting. And Gene, I oftentimes am astonished still, 50 years later, that the comment of a high school teacher changed the trajectory of my life. I talk about the value of a teacher. I tell you, good ones, I hear today, they're almost gone. The great ones are doing other things now. They've left the teaching world. And so for me, having Beta Gregg share that thought with me back in 1964, and I spent 31 years doing exactly what she thought might be a good idea. And boy, was it ever a great idea.
Well, and in fact, you put it to quit practice, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But as our custom is, as we go through the podcast, we like to just stop and ask this question about what was your knowledge of Christ or relationship with God at this time? Because with your experience, we're going to see that that came later in midlife when you really began to think about God and Christ. And so in high school, was your home religious? Was there any thought on your behalf of the part that God may play in your life, or is he just a non-entity and you're moving forward?
No, my mother was not a Christian. My stepfather was not a Christian. In fact, I believe my stepfather was probably an atheist, and I think he kind of drove my mom in that direction. But we never even talked about it. The only time I talked about God or for Christ was if a friend of mine was going to go to a summer Bible school for a week and invited me to go. I remember went to one of those or two of those when I was very young. We would go to church on Christmas. We would go on Easter. And other than that, my life was void of any spiritual involvement whatsoever. I had a high school girlfriend that I was with my entire high school years, and she lived right next to her church. And so I would go to church with her on Sundays just so I could see her on Sundays, but nothing ever took. I never got into it. It just wasn't spoken of in our home whatsoever. That came later in my life.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Very good. And so your teacher tells you, junior in high school, broadcasting is the way to go for you. And before you left high school, or just after you graduated, you were in radio. Tell us about your early days in radio after high school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was graduated from high school, and then I got an offer to work in Lancaster, Ohio at WHOK, right on Route 33. And I would drive from Columbus down to Lancaster and pull a shift on Saturdays and Sundays. And then a station in Newark, Ohio heard me and called me and offered me a better deal, I think 50 cents more an hour. And I jumped at that. I jumped at that. So I went to work for WCLT in Newark, Ohio. And that went very, very well until one Saturday in the fall of 1966, I got a letter from the government telling me that I had been drafted. And then I went into the armed forces, served 3 years in the United States Army, was with the Presidential Honor Guard at Fort Myer, Virginia, the same honor guard that guards the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and does all of those amazing funerals at Arlington Cemetery. I remember being involved in setting those flags in front of the headstones the night before Memorial Day, and then going in Memorial Day night at 9 o'clock at night and start taking all those flags out. So that was a great, great privilege of mine and very sobering. And from there, from the Honor Guard, I went over to Iran. That's back when Iran liked us. The Shah was in power. I was with the Armed Forces Radio Television Network in Tehran for about 18 months before finishing up my career at Fort Ord in Monterey, California. And then I went to college.
That's quite an early life. So tell me a little bit about the Presidential Honor Guard. What were some of your, obviously being at the Arlington Cemetery and the impressive sight that is, and the courage.
Boy, that's what we call a spit and polish unit. Man, I'll tell you, our barracks were right there at the back gate of Arlington Cemetery. So when we had ceremonies at the cemetery, it was just a quick march into into Arlington National. But sometimes we would change uniforms 3 and 4 times a day, depending on what events we had to do. If we were in fatigues, we were in dress greens. Sometimes we were in dress blues. And so we would do events at the White House, the Capitol Hill. We would do events at the Jefferson Memorial. And we also did events at Fort Myer. They have a small gymnasium there that seated about 6,000. I'm not sure if it's even there anymore. And we would do a Friday night show called Torchlight Tattoo, where the drill team, the United States Army drill team, the Fife and Drum Corps would come out and they would perform. And I was an announcer in that unit of all things. Imagine that. So it was my job to produce the scripts, to have them approved by our commanding officer, and then to actually perform the scripts. Gary Nunn and I were the 2 announcers with the Old Guard, the 3rd Infantry, it's called. And what a great privilege that was to be with the guys who guard the tomb and the guys that perform in the drill team and the Fife and Drum Corps and the U.S. Army Band. That was a high watermark in my life. I look back at those times, and when I see the changing of the guard at the tomb, I still snap to attention as if I were still in uniform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What an amazing experience. And through your announcing, is that how the Army became aware of your interest in broadcasting and sent you over?
When I was in the Honor Guard, I'm not exactly sure how it all happened. I received orders. I came down on orders when I was with the Honor Guard, and it said you're being sent overseas. And the 3rd Infantry, the commanding officer, was not happy that I came down on orders because I'd only been there a little less than a year. And he was not happy. He called me into his office and demanded to know if I knew anything about how I came down on orders. And I said, "Sir, I'm just a measly private. How would I get impact something like this?" So I don't know how that happened, other than they had openings in Iran, and they had an opening in Saigon and one in Nome, Alaska. And I found out that later, and somehow I came down orders to fill the opening in Iran.
And your radio experience in broadcasting in Iran, what was that like, and what did you learn about the craft while you were there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a very small facility. The actual station itself was on the Imperial Guard's property, and the guard that protects the Shah. They were billeted in the same area where our radio station was, so we'd have to go through a checkpoint every single day. And those guys, they don't mess around. Those Iranian guards have rifles that are loaded with real bullets. And so when you went through those checkpoints to get into the station and to leave the station, you paid attention to exactly what they said to do. But it was a wonderful duty station. I loved being in Iran. I got to admit, I was about 18 years old when I went over there, and that's a little daunting for a young man to go from a place like Columbus, Ohio, to a place like Iran. I mean, it was like going back in time. But I quickly learned that there were other people there and other Americans there, and I got involved in that community. I met a lot of great Iranian people who worked for us, and just loved those people. And when I left there 18 months later, I really was sad that I was leaving because it was such a wonderful experience. And then I came back and went right to school. And I thought, with the experience I got in the service, couple that with a college degree, I just thought I was on a good trajectory. So I went to Ohio University in Athens. I graduated there, and then stayed around and got my master's degree in sports management, and then went out and started to take on the world. Got my first job in Toledo, Ohio, and then went to Jacksonville, Florida, where my first sports job was. And then after about 2 years in Jacksonville, I got a call from a friend who had just taken over as news director of the NBC affiliate in San Diego. And he said, "I need you to come to San Diego and work on our sports department." So I flew into San Diego, and when we were on final approach, just about to land, I looked out onto the San Diego Bay and the aircraft carrier sitting over there next to Coronado Island. And I said, before the wheels hit the runway, I'm taking this job. I don't care what it pays.
Exactly. To
And
live
I
in San
did.
Diego.
And I stayed there for 31 years.
Yes. When did you meet your wife during all this process of going to school, coming out of the Army, starting your first jobs?
Well, we met about 2 years after I was in San Diego, and
okay.
We were married about 7 years, and we had our second child. And Paige went through a postpartum depression, and she just immediately filed for divorce. It just came out of nowhere. So I found myself a divorced father of two. My son was 3.5. My daughter was 6 months old.
And I can't imagine what that felt like, because also at the same time you were away from family and support and friends, and then you had these 2 young children, of which you retained custody of. And
yeah, that was a tough one, because we had a great marriage. I was close to her family, her mother, her father, her sisters, her brother, very, very close. They were all in San Diego, and we did everything together. We traveled together. She really loved sports, and that was a real tough time of my life. And my kids came to live with me when my son turned 9. My daughter turned 6. The kids asked to come and live with Dad, so that was a court order. So I had a home in San Diego, and we lived in the Rancho Bernardo area there, and My kids have just always been my life, Gene, and they still are to this day. We never have gone through a rough patch at all, and I still honor my kids. My kids are my heroes. I talk to them just about every day. I've been in Chattanooga now for 14 years, and it's tough being away from them. But I got good news for you, Gene. I'm going to be moving back to the West Coast in the next couple of months.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. A little bombshell there for us. I want to unwind this a little bit because I think I appreciate your transparency with us, and because so many of our listeners find themselves in similar places that you have walked, and I've seen this time and time again in the podcasts that we've done. So there's this arc in your life, high school. You get your first jobs, you're loving it, you're pushing buttons, you're on the microphone, you're hearing your voice, you're working with it, I'm sure. And then, you get the draft notice, but you go to the honor guard, have those unbelievable memories. You go to Iran through, consequence and coincidence, and you are doing broadcasting. Now, I've realized that Robin Williams must have got the Saigon job. And
hey, let me tell you something about that. When that movie came out, I was trying to figure out how to sue Robin Williams, because every morning in Tehran, that's how I opened my broadcast. Good morning, Tehran. So when Good Morning Vietnam came out, I thought, what the heck? He stole my line.
Well, there you go. So we got Robin over in Saigon. You're in Iran, so you probably got the better part of the deal there. So, that's clicking. You're feeling good about life. You're in a foreign country. You're learning to identify with foreign customs and foreign people. Are you running across God at all yet? Is it still just a thought back in your mind?
No, man, over in Iran, it's about as far away as you can get from God. I mean, it's it's a heavily Muslim country. They celebrate Ramadan like all Muslim countries, and it's a scary type thing. If you're not if you don't follow Islam, so they warn you to stay out of the streets and stay away from those who are out celebrating Ramadan, because it's tough. But God was still not on my radar screen. That actually, I made it all the way through my service experience and all the way through my college experience with still no sign of God whatsoever, no appreciation for Jesus. And it was only when I moved to San Diego and started having kids and went through my divorce, and it was about 10 years after my divorce, when my son turned 11 and my daughter turned 8, Jesus said, it's time.
And we're going to come back to that moment here shortly. So, but I want them to see these steps. So you come back, you graduate college, you have these jobs. Jacksonville is not an inconsequential city. You're doing sports. Was that on the local network there?
Yes.
In Jacksonville. Okay. And then obviously, people are seeing you, recognizing you. You go to San Diego and you decide, I'm there. You got to be feeling pretty good about your career at this point. What are you thinking? I'm in San Diego now. I just met this woman. My career's going great. What's happening with Phil inside your head?
Okay, Gene, picture this. A kid from Columbus, Ohio. It's cold. It's cloudy. It's overcast 80% of the time. It's like, okay, I'm not sure I want to live the rest of my life here. I wind up in San Diego, and it's like, wow, I'm actually here. And I started meeting people and working with the NBC affiliate there, doing sports every day, living a dream. We got a Major League Baseball team, an NFL team. We had a pro basketball team for a very short period of time before they went to Los Angeles. But man, I was just living large. I mean, I was raising my children, and my kids were, I were traveling a lot together. I was really living a dream. It was an absolute dream. Somebody asked me about a month ago. I was up in Greenwood, Indiana, delivering my testimony, And somebody asked me if I'd ever want to go back and do it again. And you know what I told him, Gene? I said,
Yeah.
no.
Huh.
I said, what? You wouldn't want to go back and do it again? I said, no, because I wouldn't be this lucky. I would never be this lucky. You know, in life, certain things have to happen in certain orders for other things to happen and to blossom. And man, it just seems like every change I made in my life worked to perfection. I'm a guy who doesn't fear change whatsoever. My brother says, you change things more than anybody I know. And I said, and you know what, Rick? All those changes have worked for me, whether it's been geographical changes, whether it's been professional changes, no matter what it's been good for me. And so I'm a person who walks through the door of change with my eyes wide open with a great deal of excitement. I know some people like my younger brother, he's terrified of change.
Mm-hmm.
He said, man, I could never do what you do. I said, well, Rick, it's only because those changes have worked for me. So,
Right. Right.
you know, now I'm in my 70s, still making changes. I'm going to be leaving Chattanooga after 14 years with the ministry and going back out to be closer to my children. And I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, I bet so. So the divorce happens. All of a sudden, you are seeing the kids a very limited amount of time here for the first few years after the divorce. Your daughter is extremely young, you know, in those early baby years and toddling years. So how did you deal with that? What gave you strength and support during that time?
Well, yeah, that's you're bringing up some memories there. Yeah, that was back in the mid '80s into the early '90s. I was just being a dad. I was trying to be the best dad that I could. You know, I mentioned I had a stepfather who I was not close to whatsoever. Never really knew my real dad until I was an adult. So I never grew up with that fatherly influence, the impact of a loving dad. And that's probably also why this whole concept of a loving father, a heavenly father, it didn't resonate with me because I never had that model here. I never had a loving father, you know, model what that was all about. So I became very close to Ohio State football as a kid. And I would go down there and I would shag footballs for the football team. Why? Because I found other men, players, and other older men, father figures, Woody Hayes. And I know Woody gets a bad rap by people across the country, and I understand why. But for me, Woody was a savior for me because I could talk to him. I admired him. I saw the way he treated his players. I saw what discipline did. I saw some of the routes to success that he took. And I grew up thinking, man, I want to be able to accomplish what he did at Ohio State. So while it was tough, I kept leaning back on my childhood without a dad, and I wanted to be the dad that I never had. You either as a father, you're going to repeat the sins of your father, or you're going to treat your children the way your dad treated you. Or the third option, and it's important one, be the dad you never had. Be the dad you never had. So I never blamed anything on my dad. I never said, well, I didn't do this because my dad never modeled it. That's a bunch of crap. I just took the bull by the horns and I said, I'm going to be the dad that I wanted. And so that's what I've tried to do. And I think if you talk to Brent and Lindsay today, I think they would tell you we worked that pretty darn well. So I while it was tough to go through that divorce, I think it sharpened my desire to want to be a great dad. And I love being dad. My kids are now, 42 years old and 39. And we're still rock solid. I'll always be their dad.
Yeah, that's such a great blessing. So that's where your energy went to, and your energy in your career was still going strong. Live TV was beginning to be a thing. The big trucks would go out, and you could now actually broadcast from the event. And what people don't understand about you, and they see your beautiful face, is that You took one from Muhammad Ali on live TV and got back up. You got to tell us about that. I know your son had to be totally impressed. His dad took a licking and got back up.
Yeah, he took a licking and kept on ticking. Well, frequently when people say, "What's your fondest memory of your years in broadcasting?" I always tell the Muhammad Ali story. I was working for this NBC affiliate in San Diego at the time. We just got a live truck. It was back in 1981 or 82. It was the time when live shots on television news program was brand new. So we had a truck and we had the technology. So we wanted to showcase that every single time we could. Why? Because it gave us something to promote. It gave us something to attract the audience that maybe Channel 8 or 10 didn't have. So we were going to do this story with Muhammad Ali. He was bringing the Muhammad Ali boxing team to San Diego to take on the U.S. Marine boxing team. Ali was done fighting. He had a boxing team. So we got in touch with his people and we said, could we interview Muhammad the night of the event? They said, yes. Where would you like him? Well, we'd like him at the sports arena by 5:30. The event doesn't take place till 7:30. So we'll have a quiet sports arena, no people inside. Like to do about a 3 or 4 minute segment with the great one. They said, we'll have him there. So that day comes, we're all set up. We've got everything. We're all wired up. I've got my earpiece in, my microphone, all the wiring's good. The lights are on. Everything is perfect. And in walks Ali. And I have to admit, I just about fell over. I had never been in his presence before. And to see him coming towards me, and as he got closer to me, he put his hand out and he shook hands. And, he's kind of quiet. And you really have to listen. He says, it's so nice to meet you. I said, Muhammad, I said, you are a huge presence in my life. And I have always dreamed of this day when I might meet you. And I'm so glad it's today. And I was telling him what we were going to do. And I said, they're going to come to us in about 3 minutes and I'll introduce you. And he said, I don't need no introduction. I said, well, I get it. I know you. I know you. But I'm just going to say I'm with the greatest of all time. And he said, now you're talking. And so it was so fun. And so, sure enough, I'm hearing the anchor in my headset up at the television station. He said, Phil Stone is down at the sports arena where tonight the Muhammad Ali boxing team is taking on the United States Marine Corps boxing team from right here in Camp Pendleton. Phil, you're with the greatest of all time. And I said, Paul, I certainly am. And right when I turned with the microphone and extended it to Ali, I saw a fist come at me like a blur. And he stopped right next to my chin, so close, Gene, that I could feel the air. I could feel the whiskers just move a little bit. And so what do you do when somebody does that? I flinched and I turned and fell over the first row of ringside seats. Now I go down on concrete floor and I got all these wires attached to me, and I'm laying on the floor, and all I hear is Ali saying, "Oh my gosh! Oh no! What'd I do? Oh, come here, let me help you." And so I turned back over, and Ali's leaning over the chair. And I get the earpiece, and I put it back in my ear, and I hear laughter at the TV station. I hear the anchor and the weatherman. I hear everybody howling in laughter. Well, because I could hear that, I knew I wasn't dead. I knew I was alive. So Ali helps me back up, and I've got the cameraman had come around. Now he's in the shot. He's helping get me back up and make sure my wiring's all good. And so I said, well, Paul, I hope you can hear me. He said, we can, Phil, we can. Keep going, keep going. Well, he's continuing to laugh. And I interview Ali, and it was a great interview, Gene. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And so right when we were done, I said, well, Mohammed, thank you for being our guest tonight here on NBC San Diego. Good luck tonight, and looking forward to this matchup. I turned and sent it back to Paul, and Ali walks back over to me, and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said, you got to learn to trust. And I said, trust? He said, yeah, you got to know that I wasn't going to hit you. If I was going to hit you, I'd have knocked you out. I said, I said, I'll work on my trust quotient. But right now, I'm just so elated that I'm still able to fog a mirror here on planet Earth because I thought I was gone. And he walked away just shaking his head. And that is my last image of Muhammad Ali, walking away, chuckling to himself, because that's the kind of guy he was. You know, he was always a showman. He was a bit of a clown. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
I got to see it all in San Diego that night.
So let's talk a little bit about the transition. You're at a local affiliate and you're going to go to ESPN and NBC. And before we make that transition, you know, the unfortunate thing about being a sportscaster are most professional sports are in the evening. Now, baseball plays some during the day, and your sportscast is in the evening, and you have two children at home. How are you balancing all that?
Yeah. So when I was home, because I was working, well, when I was a sportscaster in San Diego, I was still married. So that worked out well.
Okay.
And then when I went with the networks in 1986, 87, actually I went with NBC in 1980, and I was still working at the NBC affiliate. So I was gone a lot. But the good news is when I left Channel 7 in San Diego in 1983, I was home during the week. And I didn't have to go to a TV station. So
right.
I had Monday through Thursday off where I could take my kids to school, pick them up, bring them home, had evenings with them. That all worked really, really well. But when I did travel, I had a nanny, an Italian lady who was like the mother or grandmother that you may or may not have ever had. Loving, she cooked. She was there. She dressed to the nines. Every time she came to my house, she looks like she was going to a theater or something. But Anna is a tremendous woman. She's 96 years old now. She's still with us. But Anna helped a lot. I found myself, living the life of a professional journalist and a committed father. And I say to this day, Gene, I can't honestly tell you how we did that. I just know it worked. And you know how I know? Because my kids are so loving and they're just so normal. I mean, they don't speak about a bad childhood. They don't speak about holes in their childhood. I mean, it's I can't tell you how we did it. I just know it worked, and it worked pretty darn well.
Well, you poured yourself into them according to the schedule that you had is obvious, and it turned out well for you. So that's excellent. And so all that's going on, and you're now in your mid 40s. Things are looking well, but there's something going on. Before we get to your three friends, what's going on now that's a little different inside your mind?
Yeah, it's 1992 turned into 1993. I was beginning to get very restless in my career, and I was beginning to wonder if this is really all there is.
And where were you
Because
at
there
that
was
point?
something gnawing at me. I kept thinking, my friends, my family, they keep telling me how great I am and how lucky I am. And we're talking about the people I've interviewed and the broadcasts I've done. And I kept buying into that worldly success thing, Gene, like a lot of men do, and a lot of women do. But I bought into it, and it even at the height of my broadcasting career, broadcasting was never who I was. It was what I did. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Because you were a dad.
I never blurred the lines and said, well, broadcasting is everything to me. No, it never was. I was a fan. I was a fan who happened to have a microphone. And so I loved what I did, but it never, ever overtook who I was. But there was something gnawing at me, and it just kept gnawing at me. And I knew I had to try and figure out what it was. And it was during that time when those three friends of mine that I told you about earlier, three people, only one of them was a Christian, told me that there was a church that had just opened in my daughter's school and that I needed to go to it. And I said, you know what, you know what? I'm not a weak person. I don't think I need this guy, Jesus. I just don't think I need Christianity. It's way too limiting. I like doing what I'm doing. It's just not for me. They kept on me and on me and on me. And one day showed up at my house on a Sunday morning. Sherry, Tim, and Bob on a Sunday morning banging on my door. And they basically said, get dressed. We're going to church, and Brent and Lindsay are coming too. What are you going to do? I threw on a pair of slacks and a shirt. And in 15 minutes, we were out the door going to my daughter's elementary school and going and sitting through a church service. So it was amazing to me, because that day, Gene, I laughed, and some reason I cried, and I laughed some more and I cried some more. And I couldn't figure out why. I didn't understand what was happening. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you to this day why I cried. I don't know, other than sitting in that church and listening to a message and seeing a lot of people I know in that church. I had no idea they were Christians. Blew me away. And then I started going more and more and more. And then I heard about CBMC, the Christian Businessmen's Connection. And I had a friend who was leading the CBMC team out in San Diego, and he had wanted me to go, and I kept putting them off. And finally he said, would you go today? And I didn't have a good answer. So I went to my first CBMC lunch while I was still investigating Christ. And I walked into that luncheon in Mission Valley in San Diego, Gene, and I knew more people there than the guy who ran the ministry knew. And I'd walk up to him and say, Bill, I didn't know you were a Christian. He said, well, I didn't know you were. And I said, well, I'm not. And I run into Marty. He said, hey, Phil, I didn't know you were a brother in Christ. I said, I'm not. Well, this went on about 15 to 20 times that day. And I left that luncheon, my head was just like, and so I began to really ponder. And I went to church on a Sunday, and I met a guy named Paul Lewis. He invited me to come over to his office the following day. I did. And that's when he asked me if I would read a book. And I said, Paul, I'm in the middle of football season. I really don't have time to read. I got media guides coming out my ears. I just don't have time. He said, would you read 20 pages of a book? I said, you know, I can tell you, yeah, give it to me. But I really wouldn't. And he said, well, okay. So he said, what's going on in your life? And I told him, I said, you know, Paul, I feel like it's kind of halftime of my life. And follow me on this one, because I said, it's halftime. It's halftime of this football game. And I got my kids, my son on one side, my daughter on the other. And we're walking across the field. I'm looking up at the scoreboard at halftime, and I see that we've scored a few touchdowns and we've given up a few. We've turned the ball over. We've taken the ball away a few times. And I said, Paul, I'm just not sure I have enough to make it in the second half. Does that make any sense to you? And he starts to smile. And I thought, what a peculiar reaction. I said, why are you smiling? He said, because I want you to read a book. And I said, geez, here we go. All right, give me the book. Well, the book's called Halftime. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. If you haven't read, or those who are watching or listening haven't read the book Halftime, if you're at a place in your life when you're wondering, this is all there is, if you're at a place in your life where you're successful by the world standards, but you're still wondering, is this all there is? My life just doesn't seem to be firing on all cylinders. Get this book, Halftime. And there you see it.
Yeah, by Bob Buford.
Changed my life. It's about changing your life from a life of worldly success to a life of significance. It's about leaving a legacy for those who are counting on you to get it right. And my kids were counting on me to get it right.
Yeah.
So it's still emotional for me, you know, even years later, it's still emotional for me, because I came so close to living my life without Christ. And after I read the book Halftime, I went to church that Wednesday night and I walked over to Pastor Harry and I said, Pastor Harry, I need to meet you for lunch sooner than later because I think I want to give my life to Jesus. Well, we met at Chevy's restaurant in the Carmel Mountain area of San Diego, and I gave my life to Jesus. Yeah. And 4 months later, my son gave his life to Christ at the age of 14. And Lindsay said, well, Daddy, if it's good enough for you and if it's good enough for Brent, I want to do it too. And she asked Christ into her life at the age of 11. And so that's where we are today. I've been out of broadcasting now since 1998. I've been a brother in Christ since 1994, and in 2008, ministry came calling. You ever want to know if Jesus has a sense of humor? Now you know, because I have no qualifications to be working full time in ministry. But as our president at the time said, Pat O'Neill, I told Pat, I said, Pat, when you offered me the position, I said, I'm not enough. I'm just not enough. I've been a Christian for 7 or 8 years. I don't even know all the books of the Bible. I don't even know where they're at. I don't know which are in the New Testament, which are in the Old Testament. I don't know Jeremiah from Job. I just don't know. And he smiled at me and he said, Phil, thank God. Sometimes God qualifies the called. Sometimes he doesn't call the qualified. Jesus says, you're enough for this. And if it's good enough for him, it ought to be good enough for you. Wow, boy, was that a wake-up call for me. So I accepted the position, and then I've been with CBMC now for 14 years, director of broadcast media. I do all the videos. I get to go out and interview people who have come to the Lord. I love hearing their stories. I've never heard a bad testimony yet. And everybody's story of how they found Christ is electrifying to me, because it wasn't that long when I was one of those stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate also what you said about God calling or qualifying the call. In one of your press releases, they quote you with this, and I don't know if it's original or you acquired it from somebody else, but I thought it was a beautiful statement, and I'd love to hear some more commentary on it. You said, for me, hearing God's call was a process, not an event. I was waiting for a bolt of lightning, and instead it came in the form of a gentle rain.
Yeah, you did your homework, Gene. You did a good job on this. Yeah, that still pertains to this day. I when they offered me the position at CBMC, I was waiting for that bolt of lightning. I mean, I thought it would come out of the sky and Jesus would settle down in front of me and say, come on. And because I didn't grow up with that, I just didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. So I kept waiting for things that were just fantasies. And so when Pat finally impressed upon me that this would be a terrific move for me, and I accepted the position, it was more like a gentle rain. And my transition into ministry was absolutely wonderful. I mean, my work day is filled with Bible study, and that was foreign to me. Operation Timothy, our discipleship tool, going through that with our former president, and learning what it means to be a disciple and a disciple maker. About a year ago, I had the good fortune of taking my daughter through this discipleship tool, and we're still about 4 chapters from being finished with book 2, but it's just such a beautiful life. People say, well, what you do now can't hold a candle to your broadcast life. And I said, well, it actually does hold a candle. I said, when I was broadcasting to a group of people like those behind me in Petco Park. I was broadcasting to thousands and millions. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm doing now, Gene? An audience of one. And his name is Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you, men and ladies, if you're listening to this and you're wondering about your own life, think about that. Think about the anxiety that you can strip away from your life if you can really get a grasp of there's only one person you really need to appeal to, and his name is Jesus. If you can just grasp that, this thing has all been successful today. Jesus is real. Christianity is real. And if if you haven't stepped up yet, if you're still investigating, I would encourage you to take a step forward and say, I'm going to do this. In my 27 years of being a Christian, I've not met one person yet, not one, who has regretted accepting Christ in their life.
Mhm. Mhm.
How about you?
Yeah.
For those of you
Yeah.
who are in your walk with Christ, I hope your enjoyment quotient is where mine is. I hope you're trumpeting it. I hope you're sharing your faith. I hope you're telling others what Jesus has done for you. And most of all, please remember to share that prayer is real and prayer gets answered.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. That's so well said, Phil. As you were talking, I was thinking about when you won the 5 Emmys, and you now, I'm sure they're still on a shelf where you can see them in your study or office or whatever the case may be. So talk to me about the feeling of when you won the Emmys and now when you look at those Emmys.
Oh, boy, what a great question that is. Well, I was young. I was back in the 1980s when I won all 5 of them. And what I remember best, and I tell our team here at CBMC that I have the good fortune, Gene, of going through my professional career in a team environment. You follow me? I mean,
Yes.
whatever I did, there were other people that were involved in what it was I was doing, whether it was a
Right.
nightly sportscast or whether it was a team of professionals who come together at stadiums across America, and we're there for that weekend huddle. We do the game, we break the huddle, everybody goes home. But
Right.
you are working in the context of teams, and they're high performing teams.
Mhm.
So when I began to put together a team to produce the first show that won an Emmy, I wanted to pull together 2 or 3 people to help me that I had a high degree of respect for at Channel 7 in San Diego. So I pulled together Dave Smith, Greg Wyatt, and John Jefferson. And I told them, guys, I selected you 3 because I know you guys have a strong work ethic, and we're not done until it's done. So if 5 o'clock gets here and we're still involved, we're gonna keep at it. And so we assembled that first team, and when it won the Emmy, I began to think more and more about what it takes to perform at a very, very high level and to go after this kind of an endeavor. And it takes committed people. It takes an idea that everybody buys into. It takes alignment. If you don't have alignment, you don't have anything. If one person on your team is not aligned with you, you better make a move and move that person off and bring somebody else on. So what I learned, through that time of my life was the value of investing in a great team. And don't claim to have all the answers. I mean, let your teammates, let them contribute. Don't take things away from them. I mean, don't rob them of that joy, but work with them and through them and alongside them to create this masterpiece called an Emmy-nominated television program. And then I think in later years, to answer your question, those Emmys, they became very tarnished in my eyes. They were in a box. I didn't even have them out. And my daughter said something to me about 5 years ago. She said, Dad, where are your 5 Emmys? I said, honey, I don't know. They're in a box in the garage or something. She said, well, you may not appreciate them anymore, but Brent and I one day would like to have those to remember you. Yeah. So I got those Emmys out. I sent them back to the organization that awards the Emmys, and they will give you brand new ones if you turn in the old tarnished ones. They'll do it once. Yeah. So I sent my 5 Emmys in to AFTRA, and they reissued 5 brand new Emmys. They put what they were awarded for, when they were awarded. I mean, they really did a nice job, and I didn't tell my kids I was doing it. I just did it. So when they came to Chattanooga, I have a little curio cabinet, and I have a picture of myself in my NBC blazer from back in those days. And I had the 5 Emmys in that case, and Lindsay and Brent walked in, and they were looking around, and I heard Lindsay scream. And I walked back down the hallway, and she was standing in front of the curio cabinet with tears streaming down her cheeks. And she just came over and hugged me, and she said, "Dad, you will never know what this means to me to have these back." So that's what they mean to me now. Again, it's about the legacy you leave behind, Gene. It's not about the worldly success. It's about those things mean something to them. And it just, when I've taken my last breath, for them to have those as mementos of maybe what Dad did, it's kind of cool. So
yes.
For me, they're a paperweight.
Yeah. And then describe, as we conclude here, describe your relationship with Jesus Christ.
Well, my life verse is Revelations 3:20, where Jesus himself says, "I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and answers the door, I will come in." So what does that mean? What Jesus is saying is, I'm knocking on your heart right now. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to continue to gently tap on your heart. If you want to open that door, I will come in. It's exactly what he did in my life. Exactly what he did. He was knocking on my heart unbeknownst to me. And one day I invited him in. He's not going to push his way in. He's not going to force his way in. He's not going to get heavy-handed. He's not going to just basically, order you to allow him in. That's not Jesus. Mm-hmm. He makes it available to us. So that's what Jesus means to me. He's a wonderful counselor. He's a gentle soul. He answers prayer. Oh, does he answer prayer? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so Jesus to me is very, very real. I know in the quietness of my heart, I've heard his voice. I know the feeling of when the Holy Spirit settles down around me. And I can tell you honestly, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it is amazing. It is absolutely causes the hair in my arms to stand up, the hair on my neck to stand up. When the Holy Spirit says, "I'm here," it is the warmest and greatest feeling I can even describe to you. But so that's what Jesus means to me. I am so happy I found him. I wish I would have found him before the age of 47, but I'm thankful that he's been here the last 27 years of my life, and I don't go anywhere without him.
Oh, that's an amazing summary of your relationship with Christ, and one that'd be meaningful to many people. Phil, I appreciate all the things that you've shared with us today. It's been very encouraging to me personally, and I know it will be to our audience. And congratulations. I mean, you're a young man and you're starting a whole new chapter in your life. I wish you 25 more years of happiness.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you. And by the way, kudos to you. You prepared so well for this interview, and it was very, very apparent. Your listeners and your viewers are gifted with the work you do and the manner in which you do it. I appreciate homework, and you've certainly done your homework for this one.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap.